Alrighty, lads, we are back. This time with some Star Wars lore. What was the role of the Padawan? You see, there have been many posts and many discussions where people talk about things like what is a Padawan supposed to do, or things along the lines of what are the liberties and freedoms of a Padawan in the Jedi Order, and there's more importantly a question about why do they send Padawans on dangerous missions? Like, for example, why would they send a Padawan to go kill a Dark Lord of the Sith? Why do these things happen? And what exactly does a Padawan measure up to? So we're going to talk about that. So, first things first. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button. And as always, watch every single ad for every single second and give me every single penny that I deserve. So, either way, the thing with Padawans is that Padawans have this very unique ability, and this is called the Force. We all know that. Congratulations, clap yourself on the back. You know basic Star Wars. Awesome. But in order to become a Padawan, you had to have been a youngling, which is what they call them, basically a baby or toddler who displays the affinity for the Force and is taken by the Jedi Order and taught basic things. How to read, how to write, how to swing a lightsaber, but not anything specific. It's very generic. How do you lift things up? How do you predict certain movements? But nothing too specific. What are certain codes that you have to live by? What are certain precautions you have to look out for? And by the time you're maybe around 7, 8, some even later, like 13 or 12, you are now a Padawan. And to be a Padawan, you have risen above this. Now you are supposed to study. This is really what the Padawan's supposed to be doing, is to be assigned and picked out by a Jedi Master or a Jedi Knight. You heard that right. A Jedi Knight can train a Padawan. Despite having zero experience, they just became a Knight. They can train a Padawan. The reason why is because in order to ascend the ranks within the political system of the Jedi Order, you must train a Padawan as a Knight and display a keen understanding of the Jedi Code and the Force in order to ascend to the rank of Master. So that's the reason why a Jedi Knight would take on a Padawan so willingly. Some Jedi Knights do not do that, though. In fact, quite a few do. But once a Master has chosen his apprentice, his Padawan, they begin this very long ritual of training, studying, and more or less honing the Padawan's skills with the Force, with their lightsaber, with their understanding of the world. This can be different to each master, and this is why some Padawans are instructed to spend a day or spend a week with a different master for a time and period, because the Jedi Knight or master who is training the Padawan may see a flaw within the Padawan that they cannot teach. After all, in real world circumstance, and like ballroom dancing, for example, I may know every step that there is in Roomba or Foxtrot. Doesn't mean that I could explain it very well. So I may recommend you to a different trainer who may not know all the steps like I do, but he can explain certain things about it better in different forms than I could. This is where the Padawans are used. They are more or less used as tied to a master, but they're not restricted to that master. They can always go away from their master and go, I really want to learn this lightsaber form. Like, my master only knows lightsaber form number 1, and that's it, just the Shi-Cho form. I want to learn Sorosu, so let me go spend a few days with this Jedi Master and learn Sorosu. That could be one of the situations we see. And this is very normal. It's not viewed as a disrespect or nothing like that. Now, some Jedi Masters may be a little more possessive with their Padawans and recommend them not to spend too much time chasing their own pursuits. This does happen. But usually Jedi are taught more to be more carefree and to be more social, so this isn't really too big of a deal, and this isn't that common of an occurrence. There would be really no drama, sort of say. But there have been some Jedi Masters with infamy, where some Jedi will recommend other Padawans to avoid. This is where we get into someone like Kreia. Kreia, or otherwise known as Darth Treya, She would instruct and teach many, many Padawans, but every single Padawan she taught seemed to have fallen into the dark side. She was one that many in the order at her time, which was during the Old Republic, started to view with hate and contempt, and they started to look at her teachings and say they're wrong. This would be a situation where the Jedi Council would intervene and would say, okay, Padawans, you are not allowed to learn from this lady. In fact, she's now exiled because many of her teachings seem to lead down the same road. This is how the Jedi more or less monitor the developments of the Jedi Masters. After all, if I want to see if people are learning the material, I just got to look at the professor and go, how many people pass your class? If people aren't learning the material correctly, I'll know because people keep failing your class or people keep misinterpreting things. This is where the Jedi Council and the whole Jedi Order as a foundation kick in. This is how you prevent misinformation, and this is how you more or less keep a stable source of government for the Padawans to cling on to. And this is also a very important part of their training. As a Padawan, you're supposed to learn from multiple masters so that way you get different points of view. After all, Jedi are supposed to be above everybody. They're supposed to be above and see things that no one else can, think in ways that no one else could. This is the role of a Jedi. So for a Padawan to achieve that, they have to go to multiple planets, they have to go through multiple rigorous training, spend time amongst many different masters, and in doing so get a perception of life that is far more elevated than even the most mightiest of adventurers throughout the galaxy, because they have learned laws and codes of the Republic, they have spent time in the outer edges of space, spending time where government almost is non-existent, spending time against natives and teaching them the ways of order and peace and showing people how to grow food and how to grow their society. This is meant to educate the Padawan and teach them that they are above certain people. Now, in this training, we do see how it forms the Padawans, and it forms some Jedi to become very egotistic. After all, they're always right. They are always exploring avenues and teaching people things. So it can lead to them where they may get criticized by someone who's not a Jedi, and they look down on them. They just simply look down on them and go, how would you come up with a conclusion that's better than mine? I have been here traveling across the galaxy, making every society that you can think of bloom and prosper. And here you are, some guy in a backworld area telling me that my ideas are bad. This is where some Jedi have egos. And this is where it gets kind of interesting, is people's views on the Jedi and views on Padawans. So you may think, well, what do people view Padawans then if they're always traveling around with their master, enforcing laws, teaching people how to build? What are their views of them? Well, it depends on the time period. You see, in time periods where there's a lot of strife and there's a lot of conflict, this is where people start to actually learn Jedi. And they're starting to learn that there's different ranks of Jedi, that there's different types of Jedi. But this happens a lot. This happens a lot during the Old Republic, an era known for its wars. And then we also see this in the Clone Wars, where people can't seem to tell the difference between a Sith and a Jedi. But once the wars start to kick on and the wars get darker and darker, they start to realize, okay, red lightsabers and dark clothes usually means Sith. And light robes with different colors, those usually mean Jedi. But most people don't really know the difference. And this is how people view Padawans. They don't understand that a Padawan is just an apprentice. They don't understand that a Padawan may not have all the answers that they seek. But in a time of war, like the Clone Wars, where Jedi are just abundant, people start to learn things about them and go, oh, a Jedi Knight and a Jedi Master would know stuff. And a Padawan is a nobody. Oh, okay, there we go. That makes sense. Besides that, once the time of strife has ended, now we're talking about many, many years of peace. People seem to forget, and they just think of tales of Jedis, and they just call them all Jedi Knights or Jedi Masters. They don't seem to differentiate the two because they don't understand. They don't understand it because Jedis are such a rare occurrence, and the tales get all skewed and messed up. And besides, who wants to talk about the Padawans, the apprentices? So this is why many times when you hear certain stories in the Star Wars universe or many tales, very rarely do people talk about the Padawans. And sometimes in those stories, they actually embellish them and call certain people Jedi Knights, despite the fact that they were not. They were actually Padawans during that time. A classic example of this would be Jolee Bindo, Ahsoka Tano, Darth Revan. They are the more popular ones, but there's also Bastila Shan. You see, many of these people have stories about them and their heroism, but they're always talked about like as if they were knights at the time or Jedi masters. But the truth is, when you actually read the stories and you go to the real lore and the real sources, you realize these guys were Padawans during their quote-unquote golden time. Like Bastila Shan was a Padawan when she defeated Darth Revan. She was nothing but a Padawan. She wasn't even a Jedi Knight. But once she beat Darth Revan, she ascended the rank to Knight. This is something that I think a lot of people forget. Then there's also Darth Revan. When he rejoins the Jedi Order, he was just a Padawan. And he was sent on a mission with Bastila Shan looking over him to defeat Darth Malak. Jolee Bindo, he never ascended to knighthood, just like Ahsoka Tano never ascended to knighthood. But they both are renowned and recorded in history as Jedi Knights and Jedi Masters, great teachers of the Force, despite the fact they've never ascended that rank. These are people who have done extraordinary things, like commandeering vessels, breaking stalemates, or ending wars, despite the fact that the Jedi Council didn't want anything to do with it. These are people who go out and adventure and explore and fix things. But again, they're doing so on their own beliefs, their own upbringings with their masters, doing what is right with the power that they have, being able to see beyond what other people can see and being able to have the power to do what other people cannot do. Sometimes it leads to Padawans second-guessing their masters and saying, why is the Jedi Order holding me back so much? I can do so much. And the Jedi Order does allow me the same liberties that the Republic allows. So I am allowed to fly around in a ship. I am allowed to collect credits and make money for myself. I am allowed to study science, study art. I'm allowed to do a lot of things for free with very few legal consequences. This is where some Padawans get a little too crazy. This would be the story of Frida Nad. Frida Nad is a very legendary Dark Lord of the Sith. Very legendary. He took over an entire planet and established a bloodline of monarchs who owned the planet for many, many centuries. But his story is quite simple. He was a Padawan who kept trying the trials of the Jedi Knight, but he kept failing. He kept being refused to take the trials of the knighthood. And for a long time, he kept searching knowledge, expanding and expanding upon his powers with the Force. And he could not understand why the Jedi would not allow him to take the trials. He kept thinking it was because of fear. He kept thinking that it was because they were scared of how powerful he was and they were trying to stop him from getting stronger. So he struck down the master who's been denying him his right to knighthood, and he left and became a Sith. This is where Padawans are dangerous, and this is why the trial of the knights is so important. To become a knight, you must succeed their trials. Now, to succeed their trials is different for every individual. To become knighthood for one guy, it may be to perform a heroic deed. To become knighthood for another guy, it may be to discover something that no one else could have. To become a knight for another, it could have been seeking spiritual enlightenment, where they look upon the Jedi Code and they realize something about themselves. This is the trial of the knighthood. This is why it's so important. It shows that you have a deep understanding of the Force and you have a good understanding of the Jedi Code, and you understand what it means to be the peace bringers, to be the sheriffs of the galaxy, and to uphold the traditions and rules that they govern. Now, I want you to think about what I just said. A deep understanding of the Force and a deep understanding of the Jedi Code. Not once in that sentence did I say a deep and great, powerful power dwells inside you. That is not the way of the Jedi. You could be the weakest individual with the Force and the most crappiest of swordsmen, and you could become a Jedi Knight. You could become a Jedi Master for all I care. That's the thing, though. And this is something that I think a lot of people get tripped up on. They're always like, a Jedi Padawan? You're incapable of anything. No, they're actually capable. It's just that they lack understanding. They lack knowledge and wisdom sometimes. This is what leads to certain scenarios. Like Obi-Wan Kenobi, for example, we could look at him. He was very wise as a Jedi Padawan. He just wasn't really that knowledgeable. Like, he didn't know certain things that turn out were pretty common in the galaxy. Like, he didn't understand certain things, like why a trade union was allowed to blockade a planet. He didn't understand it. And everyone else simply did. They were like, yeah, that's pretty normal in the galaxy. He was wise, but he just didn't have the knowledge. This is where we're kind of going into it. He wasn't powerful with the Force. Like, he wasn't able to just bring an entire ship down on the ground. But that doesn't matter. In fact, during the time of the Clone Wars, it stated that around half the Jedi Order were not actually combatants. They weren't good warriors. They didn't participate in the fighting because they just decided not to. Many of them, they would redecorate their lightsabers to be more artistic than practical. So in other words, you would have this exquisite hilt that looked amazing, almost effluvium, but it could not be held properly. And there was no way to really use it in battle without breaking the thing. Because it was more art than anything else. And that's where most Jedi pretty much stayed at. So in order to ascend the rank of Jedi Master, you just, again, had to show an understanding of the rules, an understanding of the Force, an understanding of the laws. And that was it to become a Jedi Knight. And now you just got to pass on what you know to a Padawan, and ba-boom, you're a Jedi Master in no time. This is why it's so interesting, is that technically anybody could be a Padawan all the way up till they're like 30 years old. This is where Jolee Bindo comes in. He didn't really understand the Jedi Council. He could never understand the Jedi Order. He could never understand their teachings. He had intelligence, he had wisdom, he had strength in the Force. And he did multiple heroic deeds. He would just go around planets, breaking in, feeding their people, destroying tyrannical governments, and helping people along the way learn what it means to be a Jedi and ascend to knighthood. This is Jolee Bindo. But he never ascended to the rank of knighthood. He was offered it, he declined. Why was he offered it? Quite simple. There are times when a Jedi Padawan is ascended to the rank of knighthood or the rank of master even. Some Jedi Knights go to rank of master from this as well. And they didn't really do any of these laws. They didn't do any of the normal structure. Obi-Wan is a classic example of this. But the reason why Jolee Bindo was ascended to knighthood was because he killed his wife, who became a Sith Lord. That is it. And he refused to believe that. He refused to say that the Jedi Council was the right place for him. Many Jedi we would see do the same thing, where it almost seems like the Jedi Council is a little too political, where the Jedi Council and the Jedi structure, the more you look into it, it's very easy for a Padawan to look at it and go, it seems like you guys are just political animals. Like, if we're at war with a certain faction and I destroy their leader, you just automatically promote me and say, oh yeah, this guy's got a great understanding of the Force and our Jedi code. But you don't look at how that happened. Like, when Obi-Wan kills Darth Maul, it looked like he did so out of anger and rage. He just lost his master. Did the Jedi Order look into it? No, they just simply said, oh, for your heroic deeds, boom. You're now Jedi Knight. You can now train somebody. It's like, what? Are you serious? But that's the way it is sometimes with the Jedi Order. And that's why it's very easy for Padawans to look at it and sometimes do what Ahsoka Tano and Jolee Bindo do. Break away. And say, I could do much more good for the galaxy on my own than following their teachings and their structure. This is, again, the role of a Padawan. To choose for yourself what your life is going to be like. To make the choice of where your life is going to go and where it's going to lead down. This is the role of the Padawan. Explore the galaxy, learn something about yourself, mold your character the way you want to be within the strictures of the Jedi Order. And then from there, as a Padawan, you're really given the choice whether or not you want to stay in the Order by becoming a Jedi Knight, where now it's more serious, you're more tied to the Order, or leaving. You have a lot of liberties, liabilities, but by being in the Order, you are allowed a lot of diplomatic immunity, and you are given quite a nice, stable ground to rely upon. If you have no money because you gambled it all away, just spend time in the temple. You don't own a house. You don't need to pay rent. Like, come on, that's great. If you need shelter, you could just always go to a nearby Republic base and they'll take care of you, free food and everything. They won't even ask questions. You even get to call the shots on what happens in that base, despite being, again, just a Padawan. This is something that I find so unique. This is why I theorize that Jolie Bindo was probably a Padawan up to his 30s. Like, the guy was just an adventurer, and he just did what he felt was right, which was completely against the Jedi Code. You don't just do what you feel is right. Sometimes the best option in situations like a planet starving its own people is to instead do diplomacy with them. And this is what the Jedi Order strongly advised Jolie Bindo. Let's just do diplomacy and have the Republic possibly intervene or send missionary aids. Even though they're being blocked by that tyrannical government, at least we're trying something for the better overall. Jolie Bindo liked to get his hands in dirty. He's like, no. I want to do something. I know I could break their blockade and drop off a lot of supplies right now. So that's what I'm going to do. Again, it's not the teachings of the Jedi to do that, to be passive and to be peaceful, to always look out a way to talk things through, or to maybe understand where this tyrannical government is coming from. Maybe you can listen to them a little bit and see and change their perspective so they can be less tyrannical. Nope. Not some Padawans like Ahsoka Tano. When she sees some is awry, she immediately just jumps in and tries to fix it. When Anakin Skywalker sees slaves, he immediately goes out and tries to free them. When someone's whole village gets wiped out, a Padawan may say, this is too unjust. I can't just sit by and let bandits kill and rape all these people. I have the power to do something, so I'm going to go kill those bandits. This is the role of the Padawan. They are supposed to decide these things for themselves and figure out where they lie. Many times, masters do try to stop their Padawans from going down these routes, but a lot of times masters do so because they feel connected with their Padawan and they understand where they're coming from. It's like a old grandparent talking to their grandson. They understand where they're coming from, but ultimately they will not know what they're saying or what they're really coming from because there's such a gap between the two. From one is experience, and from one is hot-headedness. And this is where the Padawan can live all the way up to their 30s and never ascend. We've already talked about that. But I do find it very interesting because, after all, I would love to see a story like that. A story of the Jedi where there's a 42-year-old Padawan and he's just sitting there in the temple, still a Padawan, still has his master, and his master pretty much has given up on him and doesn't really talk to him too much and just keeps like hassling him, saying, hey, are you going to take your test yet so that way I can train someone different, or are you just going to keep loafing around and hogging up my title? And it would be interesting to look at. It would be very cool to see where he does what he feels right, and every time he takes the same test that some 20-year-old is taking, he keeps failing, and he keeps looking at them going, what am I saying that's wrong? Or, what am I doing that's wrong? And all the Jedi just kind of look down at him and just see him as like an idiot, when reality is, he's not dumb, he's not incapable. It's just that he doesn't follow their strictures that well. He is impulsive. He does what is right, what is good. He always brings peace to a world, no matter how direct the action must be. That would be a very interesting Jedi to watch, to see a guy where you have to pull yourself back and go, wait a minute, he didn't really do the right thing there. Now there's going to be repercussions. Like, he may go on a whole diplomatic spree, causing huge waves of issues with the Republic, but at the same time, you want to applaud him and go, yeah, Good job, you stopped those women and children from being shot by these evil, tyrannical soldiers. But then at the backside, you gotta sit back and go, wait, the tyrannical government now just blocked all communication with the Republic. So that was a good one time deed, but now you can never see what good that really brought because now the government just shut down the planet and now they could just shoot their people willy nilly. And those people you just saved are probably going to get killed too now. It, it would be an interesting story to explore. It's something that I believe that people really need to open their eyes about is that the Jedi Order is not so strict and they're pretty open when it comes to their Padawans and their knights. It's just with Jedi Masters, it's usually more of a political thing. Because once you're a Jedi Master, it's very political and it starts to become a bit of a TV show drama where you start to become invested in what's happening in the political machinations of the Republic and how the Order is reacting to it. Whereas a Knight and a Padawan, they're usually not that invested. They're more invested in what can they do to stop a situation or to help a situation. Besides that, this has been Free 700. I am out. I hope you guys enjoyed this long, lengthy talk about the Padawans. Besides that, like, comment, subscribe. I already said it before. Thank you.